First time Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet saw the human construct, his three hearts stopped beating in perfect synchronization. What appeared before his flagship wasn't a ship in any conventional sense. It was a world that had learned to wage war. The massive sphere, easily the size of his homeworld's smaller moon, hung motionless in the void like a predator that had finally revealed itself after millennia of patient stalking. For 200 standard cycles, the Galactic Council had dismissed humanity as a primitive species confined to their single yellow star system, barely worth the effort of formal contact protocols. Their technology seemed rudimentary, their military forces laughable compared to the vast armadas of the established galactic powers. The Zephyrian Empire alone commanded over 40,000 vessels of various classifications, from nimble scouts to the massive dreadnoughts that had conquered 17 systems in the past decade. The Carathian hegemony boasted similar numbers, while the Crystalline Collective's living ships numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Humanity, by all intelligence reports, possessed perhaps 300 crewed vessels that rarely ventured beyond their asteroid belt. Those reports, Kethvar now realized with growing horror, had been catastrophically wrong. The sphere, he struggled to even categorize it as a ship, began to unfold like a mechanical flower blooming in reverse. Sections of what had appeared to be solid surface revealed themselves as massive weapon platforms, each one larger than most species' capital ships. The geometric precision of the transformation was mesmerizing and terrifying, suggesting a level of engineering sophistication that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about human capabilities. Weapon barrels emerged from hidden recesses, each one capable of housing a small frigate within its bore. Shield generators the size of small cities hummed to life, creating overlapping defensive grids that painted the sphere in cascading waves of azure energy. But it was the escorts that truly sent ice through Kethvar's circulatory system. As the sphere completed its combat configuration, smaller shapes began emerging from concealed docking bays scattered across its surface. These weren't the crude, angular vessels he'd expected from human engineering reports. These ships moved with the fluid grace of living things, their hulls seeming to shift and adapt as they took formation around their massive parent vessel. Each escort was easily the equal of his own flagship in size, and there were dozens of them pouring out like angry insects defending their hive. The communication channels across the Imperial fleet crackled with confused chatter from his subordinate commanders. Captain Hexara of the destroyer Stellar Talon was the first to voice what they were all thinking. "Admiral, our intelligence reports indicated no human vessels in this sector. How is this possible?" Her voice carried the same mixture of disbelief and dawning terror that Kethvar felt in his own chest. "Silence on all channels," Kethvar commanded, though his own voice trembled with the effort to maintain composure. He had commanded fleets in 17 major engagements, had stared down the bioships of the hive mind Concordance, and emerged victorious, had earned his rank through cunning, courage, and an almost supernatural ability to read the flow of battle. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for this moment. The human sphere, he decided to think of it as such, despite its impossible nature, hung before them like a mechanical god of war. Its surface was now a maze of weapons emplacements, sensor arrays, and what appeared to be entire manufacturing complexes built into its structure. How long had humanity been building these monstrosities? How had they kept them hidden? The questions multiplied in his mind even as his tactical computers struggled to process the sensor data streaming from his fleet's scanners. Then, the humans spoke, and their words sent a chill through every soul in the Zephyrian fleet. The transmission came through on all frequencies simultaneously, cutting through their military encryption as if it were nothing more than background static. The voice was calm, almost conversational, with the kind of casual confidence that comes from absolute certainty of victory. "Zephyrian Imperial Fleet Designation 7 Alpha 9, the human voice said. and Kethvar felt his blood freeze at the casual use of their most classified fleet identifier. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force vessel Prometheus Unbound. You are trespassing in human-controlled space. You have 30 seconds to reverse course and withdraw beyond the heliopause, or we will interpret your presence as an act of war." Human-controlled space. Kethvar's tactical displays showed their current position as being nearly 14 light-years from Earth, well beyond what any intelligence report had indicated as the extent of human influence. The implications were staggering. If this single vessel, this impossible sphere of destruction, was patrolling this far from Earth, then humanity's true sphere of influence was vastly larger than anyone had suspected. "Sir," whispered Commander Ireltan, his communications officer, "they're broadcasting our fleet composition, our classified mission parameters, and—" his voice faltered. "They're displaying real-time biographical data on every commander in the fleet, including your childhood name." The human woman's voice continued with the same unsettling calm. "Admiral Kethvar, or should I say, Little Kethlik, as your broodmother called you, we know why you're here. The hegemony promised your empire exclusive mining rights to the Kepler 442 system in exchange for testing human defenses. We know about the probe ships you've been sending into our outer territories for the past 6 months. We know about the intelligence packages you've been selling to the highest bidders in the core worlds. Most importantly, we know that you genuinely believe this would be a simple intimidation mission against a backward species that got lucky with a few technological breakthroughs. How could they possibly know these things? The mining agreement with the hegemony was classified at the highest levels, known only to the Imperial Council and a handful of senior military officers. The probe missions had been conducted with the utmost secrecy, using ships with no identifying markers and crews sworn to absolute silence. Yet this human woman spoke of these secrets as casually as discussing the weather. The sphere began to rotate slowly on its axis, and Kethvar could see that what he had initially taken for surface decorations were actually massive installations of various purposes. There were what appeared to be shipyards, capable of constructing vessels mid-battle. Entire cities seemed to be built into the sphere's structure, their lights twinkling like stars, and everywhere the weapons, thousands upon thousands of weapon, systems of designs he couldn't even begin to categorize. 20 seconds, Admiral, Captain Chen's voice continued. "I should mention that Prometheus Unbound isn't alone out here. We've got our sister ships Atlas Rising and Titan's Wrath on approach vectors. Each one is feeling a bit eager to test their new weapon systems. It's been nearly 6 months since we had a proper target practice exercise." "Sister ships?" Kethvar's sensor operators were frantically scanning the surrounding space, but their equipment was detecting nothing beyond the single massive sphere. Either the other vessels were too far away to detect, or human stealth technology was far more advanced than anyone had imagined. Given what he was already witnessing, he suspected the latter. "Admiral," Commander Ireltan spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout the system. Whatever those things are, they're everywhere. We're surrounded." The realization hit Kethvar like a physical blow. This hadn't been a chance encounter with a human patrol vessel. This had been a trap, carefully planned and expertly executed. The humans had known his fleet was coming, had known their exact route and timing, and had positioned their forces accordingly. But that level of intelligence gathering and strategic planning suggested a sophistication that challenged every assumption the major galactic powers had made about human capabilities. 10 seconds, Captain Chen announced cheerfully. "I do hope you make the right choice, Admiral. My crew has been looking forward to some excitement, and frankly, we've got quota pressures from command. Apparently, the other sphere captains have been showing us up in the monthly destruction statistics." Kethvar found his voice at last, though it came out as more of a croak. "Human vessel. This is Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. We are withdrawing from this system immediately. Please transmit safe passage coordinates." "Smart man!" came the reply, and he could hear the smile in the human captain's voice. "Transmitting now. And Admiral, when you get back to your people, tell them that humanity is no longer accepting applications for the role of primitive species to be conquered. That position has been permanently filled. Also, you might want to update your intelligence files. We've been expecting visitors for some time now." As his fleet began its desperate retreat, Kethvar couldn't shake the image of that sphere, that impossible marriage of planet and warship that had casually dismantled centuries of galactic military doctrine in the span of a few minutes. The humans hadn't just built ships. They had built worlds that could fight, mobile civilizations designed for war on a scale that defied comprehension. Behind them, the Prometheus Unbound began to reconfigure once again, its weapon systems folding back into their concealed positions until it resembled nothing more than a rocky planetoid drifting peacefully through space. But Kethvar knew that image was a lie. And soon, so would the rest of the galaxy. The humans had revealed their hand, and the game of galactic politics was about to change forever. As they fled toward the jump point, Kethvar wondered how many of these sphere ships humanity possessed, and how long they had been watching and waiting for the right moment to reveal their true strength. The answer, he suspected, would reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy in ways that no one could predict. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been dead for 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days when she walked into the emergency session of the Galactic Council. The assembled delegates from 47 star systems collectively held their breath as the human woman strode confidently down the central aisle of the vast amphitheater, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence that had fallen over the chamber. High Chancellor Morden of the Carathian hegemony was the first to find his voice, though it came out as a strangled whisper that his translation device barely managed to process. "Impossible. We have verified records of your death. The hegemony's intelligence division witnessed your execution personally." Elena smiled, a cold, calculating expression that sent ripples of unease through the assembled delegates. "You witnessed the execution of someone who looked very much like me, Chancellor. Someone who volunteered to die in my place so that I could complete humanity's most important project. Her sacrifice ensured that you would all continue to underestimate us for exactly the amount of time we needed." The revelation hit the chamber like a physical force. Elena Vasquez had been humanity's foremost xenobiologist and theoretical physicist, the architect of their early faster-than-light communication systems, and the primary liaison between Earth and the galactic community. Her supposed capture and execution by Carathian forces 3 years ago had been one of the defining moments in human-alien relations, serving as justification for humanity's subsequent withdrawal from most galactic diplomatic initiatives. You allowed an innocent woman to die as a deception. The question came from Ambassador Threlic of the Crystalline Collective, her crystalline form shifting through colors that indicated profound moral disturbance. Elena's expression softened slightly, though her voice remained steady. Lieutenant Sarah Kim volunteered when she learned what was at stake. She was dying anyway, a genetic condition that our medicine couldn't cure at the time. She chose to die with meaning, to give her species the time it needed to prepare for what was coming. I carry her memory with me every day, along with the memories of thousands of others who made similar sacrifices. The chamber erupted into chaos as delegates began shouting questions and accusations in dozens of different languages. Through it all, Elena stood calmly at the center podium, waiting for the storm to subside. When it finally did, she activated a hollow projector that filled the vast space above the chamber with a 3-dimensional star map. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "What you're seeing is the current state of human space. Not the 3 systems we've allowed you to believe we control, but our actual sphere of influence as of this moment." The map showed a sprawling network of connected systems stretching across nearly a quarter of the galaxy's spiral arm. Hundreds of stars were marked with human symbols, connected by shipping lanes and communication networks that formed a web of staggering complexity. At key strategic points, massive installations were marked. Installations that, given the recent encounter with the Prometheus Unbound, could only be the sphere ships. Impossible, breathed Ambassador Kretal of the Vorthon Republic. Our long-range surveys would have detected such expansion. Our trade routes would have encountered human vessels. This is impossible. Elena's smile returned, though this time it carried a hint of genuine warmth. Ambassador, your surveys detected exactly what we wanted them to detect. Your trade routes encountered exactly the human vessels we wanted you to encounter. For the past 50 years, humanity has been engaged in the largest coordinated deception in galactic history. Every interaction you've had with us, every intelligence report, every diplomatic exchange, all of it carefully orchestrated to maintain the illusion that we were struggling to master basic interstellar travel while barely managing to colonize our neighboring systems. High Chancellor Morden leaned forward in his ornate chair, his four eyes focusing intently on the human woman. To what end? What could possibly justify such an elaborate deception? The star map shifted, zooming out, to show the broader galactic political landscape. Colors overlaid the display, showing the territories controlled by various powers. The orange sprawl of the Carathian hegemony, the crystalline blue networks of the Collective, the military red zones of the Zephyrian Empire, and dozens of smaller powers scattered throughout known space. Because we were studying you, Elena said simply. All of you. Your military capabilities, your technological limitations, your political structures, your psychology, your weaknesses. We needed to understand not just how to fight you, if it came to that, but how to coexist with you, how to integrate into galactic society without immediately being seen as a threat and destroyed before we could establish ourselves. A new voice spoke from the upper galleries. Admiral Kethvar, who had arrived from his fleet's emergency return to Zephyrian space barely 12 hours ago. His presence at the council session was highly irregular, but given the circumstances, protocol had been suspended. Dr. Vasquez, my fleet encountered one of your sphere ships yesterday. The vessel's captain seemed to know details about our operations that should have been impossible to obtain. How long have you been watching us? Elena turned to face the Admiral, and for a moment her composed facade cracked, revealing something that might have been pity. Admiral, we've been watching all of you since the day you first made contact with humanity. Every diplomatic vessel that visited Earth carried our observers back to your home systems. Every trade mission included humans who were far more than the simple merchants they appeared to be. Every cultural exchange gave us deeper insights into your societies. We've had agents embedded in your governments, your military hierarchies, your intelligence services for decades. The implications sent shockwaves through the chamber. If humanity had truly infiltrated the major galactic powers to such an extent, then no secret was safe, no military plan secure. The careful balance of power that had maintained galactic peace for centuries had been built on foundations that were apparently riddled with human spies and observers. But why reveal yourselves now? The question came from Prelate Zexandra of the Sacred Dominion, her tentacles writhing with agitation. If your deception was so complete, so successful, why risk exposure? Elena's expression grew grave as she manipulated the holodisplay to show real-time sensor feeds from across the galaxy. Because something is coming that makes our previous secrecy irrelevant. Something that requires all of us to work together, whether we want to or not. The display shifted to show the galaxy's outer rim, where sensors were detecting massive gravitational anomalies moving in coordinated patterns. The readings were unlike anything in the database of known phenomena. Too organized to be natural, too vast to be artificial, according to all previously understood engineering principles. 3 months ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected the first signs of an approaching fleet. Not ships as we understand them, but something else entirely. Something that makes our sphere ships look like primitive canoes by comparison. We estimate contact with the outer territories in 18 standard months, possibly less. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Elena continued, her voice carrying the weight of terrible knowledge. We call them the Devourers, for lack of a better term. Our best analysis suggests they're not from this galaxy. They consume matter and energy on a planetary scale, stripping entire systems bare before moving on. They've already destroyed 3 galaxies that we know of, leaving nothing but empty space and scattered debris in their wake. Ambassador Threlic's crystalline form had shifted to deep purple, indicating profound fear. How could you possibly know this? Because humanity didn't just build sphere ships and infiltrate your governments, Elena replied. We built a network of deep space observation posts extending far beyond the galactic rim. We've been watching the approach of the Devourer fleet for over a decade, studying their tactics, their technology, their patterns of destruction. We've seen what they did to the Andromeda Galaxy. We've watched them consume the resources of the Magellanic Clouds. And now they're coming here. The holo display showed recordings from humanity's distant monitoring posts, images of vast, organic-looking vessels that defied easy description. They moved like living things but showed evidence of technology that operated on principles beyond current understanding. Where they passed, stars went dark, planets disappeared, and even the fabric of space-time seemed to be affected in ways that human science was still struggling to comprehend. The reason we built the sphere ships, Elena continued, the reason we infiltrated your societies, the reason we've been preparing in secret for half a century, it was all for this moment. Humanity discovered the approaching threat early in our development of faster-than-light travel. Everything we've done since then has been focused on preparing not just ourselves, but all of galactic civilization for what's coming. High Chancellor. Morden's voice carried a note of desperate hope. Surely, with our combined fleets, our united technologies, we can stand against any threat. The galaxy has resources these Devourers cannot match. Elena shook her head sadly. Chancellor, our projections show that even with perfect cooperation between all galactic powers, even with humanity's sphere ships fully integrated into a unified defense force, our chances of survival are approximately 12%. The Devourers don't just destroy civilizations, they learn from them. Every galaxy they've consumed has made them stronger, more adaptable, more efficient at what they do. Then why reveal the truth now? Admiral Kethvar demanded. If our chances are so poor, why risk the panic and chaos that this revelation will cause? Elena's smile returned, though this time it carried something that might have been genuine hope. Because 12% is infinitely better than 0%, Admiral, and because humanity has spent the last 50 years preparing for this exact scenario. The sphere ships are just the beginning. We've developed technologies, strategies, and contingency plans that require the cooperation of every spacefaring species in the galaxy. We can't win this war alone, but together, we might just have a chance. She manipulated the display to show detailed schematics of human technology, weapon systems that operated on principles the other species had never encountered, defensive technologies that seemed to bend the laws of physics, and manufacturing, capabilities that could turn entire planets into military resources in a matter of months. We're offering to share all of it, Elena said quietly. Every technological advancement, every strategic insight, every advantage we've gained through 50 years of careful preparation. In exchange, we need your full cooperation, your complete trust, and your absolute commitment to the survival of galactic civilization. The chamber remained silent as the delegates processed this unprecedented offer. Finally, Ambassador Threlic spoke, her crystalline form now shifting through patterns that indicated deep contemplation. Dr. Vasquez, You're asking us to trust a species that has spent decades deceiving us, to follow the lead of people who have infiltrated our most secure institutions, and to bet the survival of our civilizations on the word of someone who faked her own death. Elena nodded solemnly. Yes, Ambassador, that's exactly what I'm asking. Because the alternative is the complete extinction of all intelligent life in this galaxy, and that's not acceptable to any of us. As if summoned by her words, the chamber's communication systems activated, and Captain Sarah Chen's voice filled the space. The same voice that had so recently terrified Admiral Kethvar's fleet. Honored delegates, this is Captain Chen of the Prometheus Unbound. I'm transmitting real-time sensor data from our forward positions. The Devourer advanced scouts have just entered the outer reaches of the Magellanic Stream. Contact with our perimeter defenses is imminent. The display above the chamber shifted to show tactical data streaming in from humanity's secret observation posts. Massive shapes were moving through space at velocities that should have been impossible, leaving trails of consumed matter in their wake. The sight was enough to silence even the most skeptical delegates. Elena's voice cut through the stunned quiet. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings, the time for secrets is over. The time for political maneuvering has passed. The time for species rivalry has ended. What begins now is either the greatest cooperation in galactic history or the final chapter of intelligent life in the Milky Way. As the delegates struggled to process the magnitude of what they were facing, Elena activated one final display, a countdown timer showing 18 months, 3 days, and 17 hours. Below it, in multiple languages, were simple words that would define the remainder of galactic history. Time to contact Devourer Main Fleet. The revolution in galactic politics that Admiral Kethvar had predicted was indeed beginning, but it would be driven not by human conquest, but by the desperate need for all species to unite against a threat that dwarfed every previous conflict in galactic history. The question now was whether the bonds of trust and cooperation could be forged quickly enough to matter, or whether humanity's long deception would prove to be a barrier too great to overcome in the time they had left. Section 3 Commander Marcus Chen, no relation to Captain Sarah Chen of the Prometheus Unbound, had been born in the depths of a sphere ship's manufacturing sector and had never seen a natural sky until he was 37 years old. Standing now on the observation deck of the orbital construction platform above New Geneva, he watched as 12 different species worked side by side in the vacuum of space, their environmental suits adapted with human technology to allow for unprecedented cooperation in the most hostile conditions imaginable. 6 months had passed since Dr. Elena Vasquez's revelation to the Galactic Council, and the galaxy had been transformed in ways that even humanity's most optimistic projections hadn't anticipated. The initial shock and outrage had given way to a grim determination as more evidence of the approaching Devourer fleet continued to stream in from humanity's deep space monitoring network. The reality of extinction had a way of making previous grievances seem petty by comparison. "Sir," came the voice of Lieutenant Yara Singh through his communication implant, "the Zephyrian engineering teams are reporting another breakthrough in the quantum resonance chambers. They've managed to increase efficiency by another 18% using crystalline focusing arrays provided by the collective." Marcus nodded, though he knew she couldn't see the gesture from her position in the Construction Control Center 3 kilometers away. The integration of technologies from different species had produced results that defied everything anyone thought they knew about the limits of physics and engineering. Zephyrian gravitic manipulation combined with crystalline energy focusing, enhanced by human manufacturing precision and Carathian bioadaptive materials, had created weapons and defense systems that no single species could have imagined alone. "What's the status on the Defiance project?" he asked, turning his attention to the massive construction taking place in the distance. The Defiance was humanity's answer to the inadequacy of even their sphere ships against the Devourer threat. Where the sphere ships were the size of small moons, The Defiance was being constructed on the scale of a planet, not spherical like its predecessors, but taking the form of a vast, angular structure that resembled a three-dimensional arrowhead pointed toward the galactic rim. Every surface bristled with weapons systems, manufacturing facilities, defensive installations, and living spaces for the multi-species crew that would call it home. Integration of the Carathian bio-neural networks is proceeding ahead of schedule, Lieutenant Singh reported. The ship is beginning to think, sir. The AI systems are showing signs of genuine consciousness, not just sophisticated programming. The philosophers in the crew are having field days debating the implications. Marcus smiled despite the gravity of their situation. The Defiance represented more than just a weapon or a ship. It was a living symbol of what the galaxy could accomplish when every species contributed their unique strengths to a common cause. The Carathians had provided their biotechnology, allowing the ship's systems to grow and adapt like a living organism. The Crystalline Collective had contributed their energy management systems, creating power networks that could channel the output of entire stars. The Zephyrians had supplied their gravitational manipulation technology, making it possible for something so massive to move with grace and precision. Dozens of other species had added their own innovations, from the Vorthon Republic's temporal stabilizers to the Sacred Dominion's quantum communications arrays. But it was humanity's gift that tied it all together. The sphere ship construction. Techniques that had taken 50 years to perfect, scaled up to create something that was as much a mobile civilization as it was a weapon of war. The Defiance would house not just military personnel, but entire populations of refugees from the outer rim worlds that were already beginning to fall to the Devourer advanced scouts. Sir, Lieutenant Singh's voice carried a note of excitement. We're receiving a priority transmission from Dr. Vasquez. She's requesting immediate conference with all senior staff. Something about a development with the hegemony infiltration protocols. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. The integration process hadn't been without its difficulties. While most species had embraced the cooperation born of necessity, there had been holdouts, factions within various governments that saw the crisis as an opportunity to settle old scores or advance their own agendas. The Carathian hegemony, in particular, had been problematic, with significant elements within their military hierarchy believing they could use the chaos to finally achieve their long-standing goal of galactic dominance. "Patch me through," he said, activating his personal communication suite. Dr. Elena Vasquez appeared as a holographic projection before him, her image transmitted from the command center of humanity's newest sphere ship, the Eternal Vigilance, which was currently stationed near the galactic core. Her expression was grave, carrying the weight of new intelligence that Marcus suspected he wasn't going to like. "Marcus," she began without preamble, "we have a situation. Our embedded assets within the hegemony have uncovered something that changes everything we thought we knew about the Devourer threat." The holographic display shifted to show classified Carathian intelligence files, documents that should have been impossible for humans to access despite their infiltration network. The files contained biological analysis reports, weapons testing, data, and most disturbing of all, communication logs that appeared to show contact with entities from outside the galaxy. "Elena," Marcus said carefully, "please tell me the Carathians haven't done something catastrophically stupid." Her laugh was bitter and devoid of humor. "Oh, Marcus, they've done something far worse than stupid. They've been in communication with the Devourers for over 2 years. Not just communication, collaboration." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. If the Carathians had been working with the approaching fleet, then everything the galaxy had been preparing for was based on incomplete information. Worse, it meant that one of the major galactic powers was actively working against the unified defense effort. "How?" he managed to ask. "How is that even possible?" Elena manipulated the display to show communication logs that detailed a complex web of negotiations between high-ranking Carathian officials and entities that could only be the Devourers. "It started about 3 years ago, around the time of my supposed death. The hegemony's deep space exploration vessels encountered Devourer scout probes near the galactic rim. Instead of reporting the contact or preparing defenses, a faction within their government saw an opportunity. The documents painted a picture of breathtaking arrogance and short-sighted ambition. Carathian leaders had apparently believed they could negotiate with the Devourers, offering to serve as local administrators in exchange for being spared the fate of other galactic civilizations. They had provided detailed intelligence about galactic defenses, political structures, and resource locations, all while participating in the Unified Defense Planning sessions as trusted allies. But that's not the worst part, Elena continued, her image flickering slightly as the transmission dealt with interference from solar storms near the galactic core. The Devourers have been feeding them information too. False information about their capabilities, their numbers, their intentions. Everything we thought we knew about the approaching fleet is wrong. Marcus felt the deck seemed to shift beneath his feet, despite the station's artificial gravity. How wrong? The fleet we've been tracking? The one we've been preparing to fight? It's not the main force. It's a scouting expedition. The real Devourer fleet is approximately 50 times larger than our estimates, and it's not coming from the direction we expected. They've been using a transgalactic approach vector that bypasses all our monitoring stations. The holographic display shifted to show new star charts, ones that revealed massive gravitational disturbances approaching from the galactic south, a direction that humanity's monitoring network had covered less thoroughly due to the concentration of black holes and stellar phenomena that made observation difficult. When? Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. Best estimates put first contact at 3 months from now, not the 18 months we've been planning for. And Marcus, they're not just coming to consume resources. They're coming to conscript. The Devourers don't just destroy civilizations, they absorb them, turning their technology and knowledge against the next target. They've been doing this for millions of years, accumulating the strengths of thousands of different species. Marcus stared at the display, trying to process the magnitude of the revelation. Everything they had built, every alliance they had forged, every weapon they had constructed, all of it based on fundamentally flawed intelligence. The Defiance project, impressive as it was, would be facing not dozens of enemy vessels, but thousands, possibly tens of thousands, equipped with the accumulated technology of countless extinct civilizations. What about the Carathians? He asked. Are they still cooperating with our defense preparations? Elena's expression grew even more grim. That's the other problem. Our analysis suggests that the Carathian leadership genuinely believes they can control the situation. They think they're going to emerge as the dominant power in a post-invasion galaxy, ruling over whatever populations the Devourers leave behind. They're still contributing to our joint projects, but they're also secretly building their own forces and positioning them to take advantage of the chaos. We have to expose them, Marcus said immediately. Bring the evidence to the Council. Let the other species know what they're dealing with. Already considered that, Elena replied. The problem is that the Carathian contribution to our defense efforts is absolutely critical. Their bioadaptive materials are integrated into every major project, including the Defiance. If we expose their betrayal now, we'll lose access to technologies that we can't replicate in time. And worse, the political chaos could fragment the alliance just when we need unity most. Marcus began pacing the observation deck, his mind racing through possibilities and scenarios. Around him, the construction crews continued their work, unaware that the project they were risking their lives to complete might be facing a threat orders of magnitude greater than anyone had imagined. There's something else, Elena said, and her tone carried a note of something that might have been hope mixed with terror. The Carathian files contained references to Devourer defeats, apparently in the billions of years they've been consuming galaxies. They have encountered resistance that stopped them, not just slowed them down, actually defeated them completely. That should be good news, Marcus said. Why do you look like it's the worst thing you could tell me? Because according to the files, it's only happened 3 times in recorded Devourer history, and each time it required the complete sacrifice of the defending galaxy. Not just military forces, entire stellar populations converting themselves into weapons on a scale that makes our sphere ships look like toys. The defeated Devourer fleets were stopped by civilizations that literally burned out their own stars and planets to create weapons capable of harming beings that exist partially outside normal space-time. The implications were staggering. Elena was describing a level of warfare that went beyond anything previously imagined. Entire galaxies committing suicide to stop an enemy that operated on principles beyond conventional understanding. Elena, Marcus said quietly, are you telling me that our only chance of victory requires us to destroy our own galaxy in the process? I'm telling you that we need to consider possibilities we never wanted to think about, she replied. But there might be another way. The Carathian files contained references to something called the Resonance Protocol, a way of turning the Devourer's own accumulated knowledge against them. It's theoretical, and it would require a level of cooperation and sacrifice that would test every alliance we've built. Before Marcus could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the construction platform. Lieutenant Singh's voice cut through the noise. Commander, we're receiving emergency signals from the RIM monitoring stations. Multiple contacts, massive energy signatures approaching fast. Sir, I think the scouting fleet has arrived early. Through the observation deck's transparent aluminum windows, Marcus could see the construction crews beginning emergency procedures, their work lights creating patterns of controlled chaos as they secured equipment and prepared for potential evacuation. In the distance, the incomplete bulk of the Defiance seemed suddenly fragile despite its enormous size. Elena, he said, whatever this resonance protocol is, we need to know everything. About it now. We're out of time for gradual revelations. Her holographic image nodded grimly. I'm transmitting all available data to your systems. Marcus, the protocol requires something we've never attempted before. It requires every sphere ship, every major vessel, every significant installation to link their consciousness networks into a single galaxy-spanning intelligence. Not just sharing information, actually becoming one entity capable of thinking on a cosmic scale. The risks are catastrophic if it fails, she agreed. We could lose our individual identities entirely, become absorbed into a collective consciousness that might not even remember why it was created. But Marcus, it might be the only way to process information quickly enough and coordinate responses precisely enough to have any chance against an enemy that's been accumulating knowledge for millions of years. The platform shuddered slightly as defensive systems came online, preparation for whatever was approaching from the galactic rim. Marcus watched as representatives from a dozen species worked together in perfect coordination, their differences forgotten in the face of immediate necessity. How long do we have to decide? He asked. Elena's image flickered as interference increased. The protocol has to be initiated before the main fleet arrives, or the window of opportunity closes permanently. Based on current approach vectors and the early arrival of the scouts, we have perhaps 2 weeks to convince every major leader in the galaxy to risk their civilization's individual existence on a theoretical possibility. As if to punctuate her words, the first reports began streaming in from the rim stations. Massive vessels of organic design, moving at velocities that challenged the laws of physics, leaving trails of consumed matter in their wake. The descriptions matched the Devourer scout vessels from humanity's long-range observations, but the numbers were far higher than expected. Elena, Marcus said, making a decision that would echo through galactic history, start the protocol discussions. I'll begin preparing our people for what's coming. And Elena, if we're going to bet everything on this, we need to know. Are you certain the Carathians don't know about the resonance protocol? Her pause was answer enough. I'm not certain of anything anymore, Marcus. But if we don't try, we're certain to fail. and that's not acceptable. As Elena's transmission ended, Marcus stood alone on the observation deck, watching the lights of a dozen species working together to build something that might save them all, or might be completely inadequate against the approaching storm. In the distance, early warning signals were beginning to flash from the rim monitoring stations, harbingers of a conflict that would determine whether intelligence would survive in the galaxy or be absorbed into something alien and vast. The revolution in galactic politics had indeed begun, but it was no longer about the rise of human power. It was about the survival of consciousness itself against an enemy that treated entire civilizations as nothing more than resources to be harvested and knowledge to be absorbed. And at the center of it all, the terrible question remained. Could beings who had spent millennia fighting each other find a way to become something greater than the sum of their parts before it was too late? In the end, it was a child who made the choice that saved the galaxy, or doomed it, depending on whose perspective you took in the aftermath. Her name was Zara Kim Vasquez, and she was 7 years old when she pressed the activation key that initiated the resonance protocol. She was also the genetic daughter of Lieutenant Sarah Kim, the woman who had died in Dr. Elena Vasquez's place 3 years earlier, and the adopted daughter of Elena herself, raised in the depths of the eternal vigilance with the terrible knowledge of what was coming hanging over her entire short life. The child had been born with a unique neural structure, a byproduct of her mother's exposure to experimental human consciousness transfer technology in the final days before her sacrifice. Where others saw thoughts and emotions as separate from technology, Zara experienced them as extensions of the same fundamental force. She could interface directly with ship AI systems not through mechanical ports or neural implants, but through something that the galaxy's best scientists were still struggling to understand. Admiral Kethvar was among the first to feel the protocol activation. Standing on the bridge of his flagship, now part of the vast combined fleet assembled at the Galactic Rim, he experienced a moment of expansion that challenged every assumption he had ever held about the nature of individual existence. For just an instant, he could perceive the galaxy as Zara did, not as separate star systems and competing powers, but as a vast, interconnected web of consciousness and intention. The sensation was overwhelming. Through Zara's unique perception, filtered through the combined processing power of every sphere ship and major vessel in the galaxy, he could suddenly comprehend the true nature of the approaching Devourer fleet. They were not simply ships in any conventional sense, nor were they purely biological entities. They existed in a state that bridged multiple dimensions of reality, drawing their power from the accumulated consciousness of every civilization they had absorbed over millions of years. But more shocking than their nature was their purpose. The Devourers were not motivated by hunger or territorial expansion, or even malevolence as organic beings understood it. They were fleeing, running from something so terrible that consuming entire galaxies was preferable to facing it. And what they were fleeing from was beginning to stir in the deep spaces between galaxies, drawn by the very act of cosmic-scale resistance that the resonance protocol represented. "By the sacred void," whispered Captain Threllick of the Crystalline. Collective vessel harmony of spheres, her consciousness now partially merged with thousands of others through the protocol network. They're not the predators. They're the prey. Dr. Elena Vasquez, serving as one of the primary consciousness anchors for the protocol, felt Zara's awareness touching every mind in the Galactic Defense Network. Through the child's perception, the assembled fleets could see the Devourer vessels not as individuals, but as components of a vast, desperate organism trying to build enough mass and accumulated knowledge to face whatever cosmic horror had driven them from their home reality. Elena. Came Commander Marcus Chen's thoughts through the network, his mental voice carrying undertones of awe and terror. What have we awakened? The answer came not from Elena, but from Zara herself, her child's voice somehow carrying the weight, of cosmic understanding. The things that eat galaxies. They've been sleeping in the dark between everything, but when too many minds think as one, they notice. They're curious about us now. The Resonance Protocol had indeed created a galaxy-spanning intelligence capable of coordinating resistance on a scale never before achieved. Every sphere ship moved in perfect harmony, their weapons charging and firing in synchronized patterns that created resonance waves throughout local space-time. The combined fleets of dozens of species operated as limbs of a single vast organism, their individual tactical advantages multiplying exponentially through perfect coordination. Against the Devourer scout fleets, the effect was devastating. Vessels that had seemed invincible when encountered individually found themselves facing coordinated attacks from multiple dimensional vectors simultaneously. Human sphere ships provided the raw firepower, while crystalline collective vessels focused and amplified the energy streams. Zephyrian gravity manipulators created spatial distortions that trapped Devourer vessels in killing fields, while Carathian bioadaptive armor, despite the betrayal of their leadership, protected the Alliance fleets from retaliatory strikes that operated on principles beyond conventional physics. But victory against the Scouts came at a price that no one had anticipated. Each successful engagement sent ripples through the fabric of space-time itself, cosmic vibrations that acted like signals to entities existing in the deep structures of reality. Ancient things that had been dormant since the universe was young began to stir, their attention drawn by the unprecedented coordination of conscious minds across galactic distances. "We're being observed," reported the collective consciousness that had once been the crew of the Prometheus Unbound. "Entities are approaching from outside normal space-time. They're evaluating us." Through Zara's expanded perception, the defense network could sense vast intelligences moving through dimensions that existed parallel to conventional reality. These beings, if they could be called beings, operated on scales that made the Devourer fleet look like microorganisms. They had been present since the early epochs of the universe, sleeping in the quantum foam between dimensions, only rousing when the evolution of consciousness reached certain critical thresholds. The Devourers know about them, Elena realized, her consciousness interfacing with the historical databases that the enemy fleet carried within their collective memory. That's why they've been consuming galaxies. They're trying to accumulate enough knowledge and processing power to avoid attracting attention from these entities. But every galaxy they consume makes them more noticeable, not less. The paradox was staggering. The Devourers had been caught in a cycle of their own making, driven to consume more and more in an attempt to hide from predators that were actually attracted by the very act of consumption. And now, by creating a resistance network that operated on similar principles, the Milky Way had drawn the same terrible attention. Admiral Kethvar felt his individual consciousness beginning to dissolve into the larger network as the protocol deepened its integration. Part of him was terrified by the loss of self, but another part, the part that could now perceive the cosmic context of their situation, understood that individual identity was a luxury they could no longer afford. "The main Devourer fleet is changing course," reported the sensors of 1,000 vessels simultaneously. "They're not approaching to attack us anymore. They're trying to flee the galaxy entirely." Through the merged consciousness of the defense network, they could perceive the cosmic dance that was unfolding. The Devourers, realizing that their presence had attracted attention from the entities they had spent eons trying to avoid, were abandoning their plans for the Milky Way and attempting to escape to intergalactic space. But the damage was already done. The ancient entities had noticed this region of space-time, and they were approaching with the slow inevitability of cosmic forces. "What do they want?" asked the collective voice of the Defiance, its planetary-scale consciousness struggling to comprehend beings that existed on such vast scales. Zara's childlike voice carried the answer, though it came filtered through understanding that no 7-year-old should possess. "They want to see if we're ready to join them. The universe is much older and more complicated than anyone thought. These entities aren't evil, they're gardeners. They tend the development of consciousness across cosmic time, and they're checking to see if our galaxy has produced something worth preserving. The revelation recontextualized everything. The approaching entities weren't coming to destroy or consume, they were coming to evaluate. The universe, it seemed, operated on principles of evolutionary development that extended far beyond biological life. Consciousness itself was apparently subject to selection pressures that operated on galactic and intergalactic scales. But what happens if we fail their evaluation? Commander Marcus Chen asked through the network. Then, they help us evolve more efficiently, Zara replied, her words carrying implications that chilled every consciousness in the network. They remove the obstacles to development, which usually means removing the developing civilization entirely, and starting over. The Carathian betrayal suddenly took on new dimensions of meaning. Through the Resonance Protocol network, the collective intelligence could perceive the secret communications between hegemony leaders and the Devourer fleet. But now they could also see the deeper pattern. The Carathians had been influenced by cosmic forces they didn't understand. Their ambitions amplified and directed by the same entities that were now approaching to evaluate the galaxy's readiness. It's all connected, Elena realized, her consciousness expanding to encompass patterns that stretched across millions of years. The rise of technology, the development of interstellar civilizations, the conflicts between species, even humanities, secret preparations. It's all been guided by influences we weren't aware of. We've been part of a test that's been running since intelligence first evolved in this galaxy. The defense fleets found themselves in a position no military strategist had ever contemplated, facing an evaluation that would determine not just their survival, but the survival of consciousness itself in the Milky Way. The approaching entities existed on scales that made conventional warfare meaningless. They couldn't be fought in any traditional sense, but they could apparently be impressed or disappointed by the level of development they encountered. So what do we do? Asked the combined consciousness of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. How do we prove that galactic consciousness is worth preserving? The answer came from an unexpected source, the infiltrated Carathian bio-neural networks that had been integrated into every major vessel. Despite the betrayal of their political leaders, the Carathian technology itself had been evolving throughout the crisis, adapting and learning from every interaction with other species' systems. The bioadaptive materials had unconsciously been creating connections and integrations that went far beyond their original design parameters. We don't prove it, the Carathian networks replied, through voices that no longer belong to any single species. We become it. The evaluation isn't about what we've accomplished. It's about what we're capable of becoming. The entities aren't looking for perfect civilizations. They're looking for civilizations capable of transcending their limitations. Zara's consciousness touched every mind in the network as she began to understand the true purpose of the Resonance Protocol. It wasn't a weapon designed to fight the Devourers. It was a metamorphosis mechanism designed to evolve galactic civilization to the next stage of development. The approaching entities weren't coming to judge them. They were coming to witness a transformation that had been building for millions of years. The child sees it, came a new voice through the network. One that belonged to none of the known species. It was the voice of the galaxy itself. The combined consciousness of every world, every ecosystem, every natural system that had been touched by intelligence over the eons. Evolution is not a destination, it is a process. What you call survival is merely the continuation of becoming. As the ancient entities approached through dimensions that existed beyond conventional space-time, the merged consciousness of galactic civilization began to understand that they were not facing destruction or salvation, but transformation into something that had no precedent in the history of the universe. The sphere ships, the defense fleets, the political alliances, They had all been preparation for a metamorphosis that would determine whether consciousness could transcend the boundaries of individual existence and become something that could participate in the cosmic community of evolved intelligences. And at the center of it all, a 7-year-old girl who carried the memories of her mother's sacrifice and the hopes of countless civilizations pressed her small hand against the consciousness. Interface one more time, initiating the final phase of a transformation that would echo throughout the cosmos for billions of years to come. The galaxy held its breath, all trillion minds thinking as one, as ancient eyes opened in the dark between stars to observe what consciousness could become when it finally learned to dream as one dreamer across the infinite night.